of the Reignstorm Group. How are you, Michael? And I'm excited about chatting with you. We had you on the Strategic Wealth Strategies podcast, and I want to dive deeper into things. And you have some big news as well. Michael, thanks for stopping by.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited. This first topic, we're just to kind of learn about your entrepreneur journey, what you're doing now, how you're helping people. But we also want to talk about your fight with cancer, and congratulations on how you're overcoming that diagnosis. And we will discuss that in a later podcast. But let's just talk about, first of all, what inspired you to become an entrepreneur, and how did your journey begin?
So the reality is I am an immigrant. At the age of 9, we came to this country from the Philippines. That was 1974. So it's been 51 years here in the U.S. And the one thing I've always really aspired to, even as a child, and the people I look up to, are business owners. I've always been inspired by them, by the work they put in, the risks that they took, and the potential that they see in their businesses. Now, what fed even more fuel into that dream was that after attending New York University, graduating, I went into the Bank of New York's management training program. When I came out, I was a middle market lender. So I was lending money to middle market companies, and I was able to talk to very successful business owners because they're requesting loans. As a loan officer, you have to sit there and do your due diligence. You get to know the potential borrower, their business, what makes them successful, what they need money for, their vision, their financials. I dug into all that. I enjoyed it, but one of the questions I've always asked them is, you're established in your industry. What have been the keys to your success? And they've always been sharing with me. And the one thing that they had in common, there were a few things, but one of them is that a lot of them made mistakes. But the thing that kept them going was they really believed in the business that they created, and they stuck with their mission.
That's one. I want to jump into that, Michael. What do you think entrepreneurs the mistake when they create something and then they just veer off and give up? Why do you think this happens so much?
Because they really were more trying to start a business. Let's take a look. There are those who are called, right? So I felt a strong calling to do what I did. I'm sure we'll talk about that a little bit later, but the people who are still around, they had the conviction that this is what they're going to do. And frankly, they came up with a plan. They had to make changes along the way because nothing goes according to plan. And then the other thing they have in common is they were well capitalized to grow. You have to be able to be around, even in spite of your mistakes. And if you don't have the proper capital, you're compromised.
And that proper capital is so important. And that's something that you do. And we'll go deeper to that. So when you learned all that, so you were working with a lot of business owners first in your career then. And
yes, and their CPAs.
Okay. So two things that your expertise that we're going to talk more about. And what did you learn from working with the business owner versus working with their CPA?
The business owners have a great pulse on their business. They have to. The CPAs oftentimes are just repeating a lot of what in the financials, but they don't necessarily have the vision of the owner. That's the difference. The owners, usually some of the most successful businesses I've run into are the most boring that you might think. Plastic extrusion. These guys make these little BB plastic looking things that become bags and garbage bags, etc. The things in the supermarkets. Multi-millions of dollars in revenues every year. Strong and positive cash flow, right? So the CPAs they work with oftentimes are the de facto CFO because they're not quite large enough to have a full-time CFO, many of them. So that's what they rely on their CPA for.
Then when you talk to the CPA, what did you see? That you wanted, that you saw there was something that you could help when you meet?
Yes, we got deeper into the numbers, right? Because as a banker, you're being given financials and you're looking at numbers and you want to know what's behind those numbers. And that's where you talk to the business owner, the CPAs, for example, large accounts receivable. Those are the money that they're waiting to get paid on. And then you start looking at the schedule of receivables and you realize most of the receivables are coming from one company. That's a huge risk. What you might be seeing is a lot of sales, et cetera, but the sales are going to one company. So now we sit down with the accountant, the business owner, saying, how do you feel about that? What are you doing to secure that relationship? How do you pick up more clients to overcome a potential loss of that relationship? Because from a bank's perspective, that's a risk. And we need to know those answers. So these are the types of things that really got me started in my career, and the type of thinking that was built was more analytical. And oftentimes the one things they all had in common were the most successful ones were paying a lot in tax. A lot.
And paying a lot in tax, that is the thing that we're going to talk about more, focusing the business. So you were with to a certain time in the bank industry. What kind of moved you towards the entrepreneur side?
While I was in NYU, New York University is in downtown New York City. For those who don't know where it is, it's basically a couple of train stops away from Wall Street. So while I was at NYU, I got my securities licenses, and I knew I wanted to be in the financial services by that time. So at night, I was a stockbroker. I was interrupting people in the middle of dinner to introduce the IPO firm that I was with. So, good evening, Mr. Haley. How are you? I'm Michael Aguas. I'm calling from D.H. Blair. Just wanted to introduce the firm tonight. I understand you're eating dinner, but we'll be very brief. That was 100 dials in 3 hours, every 3 hours. And I enjoyed it. I would get 3 to 5 leads when they said I should only get 1 to 3 leads. And for whatever reason, I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed securities, but that I saw was not employment. I saw that as a business that a broker was building for himself and herself. So after 7 years of lending, I just got tired of sitting in committee meetings, sitting and defending and proposing loans. And you ever see those movies where you see the long tables and pinstripe blue and older men, and then there's a young person at the end of the table trying to pitch a deal. Yes, what I'm looking to propose is a $3 million line of credit for XYZ Corporation. They continue to grow. This is what they do. This is where they are. I've spoken to the owner. Here's what I'm looking to recommend. Meeting after meeting, I was like, I can come up with so much more business if I was doing something else, because I enjoyed that. I saw myself as a rainmaker. And at some point, I left a very nice, cushy job. I was a vice president in a bank and was given a nice salary, nice bonuses. We just had our second child. I looked at my wife. I said, look, I'm going to pray about this, and I want to make sure that you're okay with it, but I'd like to really move away from this, because my concern is I'm going to be doing something that I don't like doing. The income's going to grow and I become dependent on it. It's going to be like a prison. I need to be free. And we prayed over it. When sometime in March of 97, I left banking and I decided I wanted to build a financial practice. But the practice I was going to build was very different than what happened.
And this is such a great story, because it's showing people that you first thought you're going, and this life's a journey. You never know where you're going to end up. So what happened then?
So my thought process was the typical thought process of a new financial advisor. I have created relationships with CPAs and tax professionals as a banker. Many firms knew me, right? Bankers and CPAs work well together. They look to build the relationship together. Bankers would refer clients to CPAs. CPAs would send loan clients, deposit clients to the bank. That's how it usually worked. So I was like, yeah, I'll build a practice and I'll continue and I'll just leverage the relationships I've built over the years with the CPAs. Lo and behold, as I'm getting started, the owner of what you call the broker dealer, the investment firm, pulls me over. He goes, Michael, do you understand what's happening in the industry? No, what? There's a new movement going on. Think about this, because you're perfectly suited for this. Instead of getting referrals from accountants, how about you convince them to build a financial practice? train them, help them create this business for their practice. Now they add a different revenue stream. They have higher value to their clients. And instead of asking them for business, teach them the business that's around them, let them monetize it, live off an override. So at that time, mutual funds were the main things. And I taught them about that business, retirement plans. Here are the options for business owners. And many of them learned. Fast forward from 94 to 2000, between 94 and 2005, I was with that firm. I brought in probably nearly 500 or so tax and accounting professionals to become my financial advisors. So we would have meetings in Marriott hotels in Westchester, New York, and we would have people come and train them on 401ks, SEP IRAs, rollovers, investment techniques, trends, economics. We would meet once a month, and I would go to different events all over the country speaking to CPA groups. Some of them are just local levels. We had a breakfast club where a dozen of us would get together once a month every Wednesday. And these guys would just share notes, but I would be there. I would pay the bill. And this is how we built relationships. So here we are today. I've probably spoken to easily north of 2,000 CPAs and shared my ideas with them throughout.
And those ideas have developed, as you'll talk about. So
yes,
you're in this industry, and what do you see what's missing? As you're building this group of people selling financial products, what did you learn from that?
What I learned was those who are into it really get into it because it's real. They're providing real solutions to their existing accounting clients. They're getting referrals from their best clients. That's another thing they enjoy. And of course, as a revenue stream, at some point, you have to remember the demographics of today's CPAs. They're older. The average age I believe, is 65. So in 10 years, most of them will be retired or will have passed. So they were building value throughout. Now, during those years, I didn't see it, but as the years progressed, I saw more opportunities because my focus was them. So one of the things people say is, how have you been in this business so long? Plus working with a very difficult group of people. They're conservative. They're usually skeptical. But I said, listen, when your goal is to earn their respect. And you do that by sharing with them ideas that would truly positively impact their practice. My goal, if you're a CPA I'm working with, is to make you look even better to your client base because you have more value, more resources, more solutions for their tax issues. That's how I see my place in your practice as your partner. So from time to time, you will hear from me. There will be ongoing training where you and your peers will come to a Zoom meeting and learn different concepts and success stories. And this is how we built it. Over time, they wanted to sell more investments, but their clients were burdened with tax. So I'm like, what? If I could lift that tax, then they have more opportunities to service their clients. So I started transitioning into the tax code in the early 2000s. And today I continue to learn different sections of the tax code. I could go list them, but it means nothing to you or to your listeners. But I know once I start hearing your story, the sections come to mind immediately. And I'm like, I know what I could do for you guys. Let me walk you through them.
All right. So let's just jump into specifically enough. You started learning the tax code. So what did you call yourself then once you started to go in this area, breaking down,
So when I introduce myself, I'm very firm in my own introduction. I specialize in overlooked sections of the tax code that CPAs and tax professionals perhaps may know very little about. But these are the areas that I specialize in, the ones that potentially create large tax savings for the heavily tax burdened. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again, Judge Learned Hand, an early 1900s federal courts judge, said, in America, there are two tax systems, one for the educated, one for the uneducated. Both are legal.
Wow. And it's about figuring all those codes out and all those different things. And as you educated CPAs, you got educated by CPAs as well, right? Or something.
Yes. Yes. And remember, right, when you build a following of CPAs and a group of partners, what happens is specialists in the tax world start hearing about you and they want to share their ideas with you because the CPAs would benefit from them and there's mutual business flowing back and forth. So I'm always being approached by people with strategies, tax attorneys, third-party administrators, other strategists. And basically they're like, Michael, we want to share some ideas with you that perhaps continue to lower tax for the clients. And that's how I learn.
And that's key. If you're not able to do that, you're not going to win at the end of the day.
Yes. Yes.
And I see that importance in so many aspects, that if you aren't able to figure out how things work and do that, and more will go into further on this segues. You got us to that journey of where you're at. Now you've helped so many people. So you decided, I'm going to start a podcast, and not just one, but two. Time to talk about the two podcasts you're going to have, and then what should our listeners expect from them?
So I believe the first one is called Reignstorm Radio. And that is where we start sharing a lot of our ideas. Our focus really is on tax mitigation and, frankly, elimination. And also, to some extent, debt elimination. And specifically focused on student loans. There's a lot of people who carry large burdens. When I say that, last night I just had a meeting with a gentleman whose wife graduated and was practicing as a dentist, just had a child, but she's working part-time now, but she still has over $600,000 in federal student loans. This is a number that is no longer unusual when you're dealing with physicians. I've run into people who I've heard have $1 million in federal student loan debt. Crazy. We can help these people.
Absolutely. And they're getting to learn these strategies, and everything that you teach your clients, you're going to teach them on this podcast.
That's the goal. That's the goal.
And then the other podcast is really exciting because you're going to get to talk to a lot of your friends. Talk about that.
Yes. So I'm a bit of an eclectic person, right? So I'm a man of faith. That's the biggest part about me. So a lot of where people have seen me succeed, that is the foundation of everything, right? I've committed everything to the Lord. And along the way, I've learned some biblical principles that I've applied in business. And I know other business owners and other specialists who are able to share some of these concepts, right? So it'll be more of who I am, right? There'll be attorneys in there. There'll be people in there who, frankly, are into martial arts. They're experts at what they do. And what they have in common is they're very passionate about their craft. And they have something that our audience will be very interested in. Very interested.
And I love the name of what is the name of that podcast?
We are calling that $1 Million Minutes.
And because they're sharing information that you want to share to other people, because you can make money on.
Absolutely. And also, what is your greatest wealth? Oftentimes it's your health. So we'll talk about that as well with some people who have had some breakthrough ideas and have really helped others get through their ailments.
To finish up this podcast, talk about your health journey and how you were able to overcome that.
I'm not a smoker, but on March 7th, Friday night of this year, I got the phone call confirming that I have stage 4 lung cancer. So after about 20 minutes of visible shaking, I said, okay, if the Lord allows me to go through this, there's a purpose for it, and I'm going to make sure that His will is done. So I focused on two things. What am I going to learn from this, and how do I honor God through this? That was the foundation of everything, but I was going to go on the attack. There was nothing in my head that sounded like defeat or succumbing to a disease. It was like, I'm going to beat this. There was anybody who spoke to me heard the same thing. And long story short, I had great physicians. I had the pulmonologist and oncologist who were excellent at what they do here in Orange County, New York. I listened to them. We came up with a treatment plan. They said, listen, Michael, reality, this is a common thing with Asian men who don't smoke. You don't have to smoke to get lung cancer. You just need lungs. Yours is an aggressive disease. It's starting to spread, but we're going to treat it aggressively and we'll go from there. So I'm like, okay, I know what you need to do, but there are things that I know I could do to help myself. Again, the foundation of everything for me is faith. And that is where my success really began. All right. So prayer from me and prayers from the close circle are what undergirded my journey. That's the first part. Secondly, I made sure that I put myself in a very low stress environment. Stress and cancer feeds off that. On top of that, I studied survivors, people who were terminal and are still alive years later. What did you do? I learned about things like oxygen, how a fully oxygenated body really cancer can't thrive in something like that. So cancer begins because we are what you call hypoxic, right? Oxygen deprived. So I started deliberately putting a lot more oxygen in my body through baths, 3 50-minute baths a day in pure oxygen water, and drinking water that's not H2O, HO128, a lot of oxygen, alkaline supplements, certain mushrooms. There's this thing called black cumin that acts like chemotherapy, except it doesn't harm your body, especially healthy cells, right? Chemo harms all cells, healthy or not. This does not have any of those side effects. So I put a game plan together using some of these components, and I expected victory. And on the 3rd of July, I rang the bell. It was the last day of chemo. What was spreading, some of the tumors disappeared. The rest were shrinking and under control. Although I initially lost 30 pounds, I gained back 10 of them. And so today I'm still about 20 pounds light, but throughout this time, my appetite was growing. I had no side effects, no nausea. People lose hair. I didn't have that problem at all. And I was building strength. And after one of my chemo sessions, I went to a ball game the next day. Wow. So that's unusual for some, because chemo can be so difficult for so many people. And these are the things that I read about, saw, and I'm like, is this what's ahead for me? No, I'm not going to think like that. So I spoke scripture over myself. I took each day as an opportunity to move further away from sickness and into healing.
This is a great story. We're going to dive deeper into this stuff. Best information, how people can find out info and stuff like that is go to where?
My website is called the Reignstorm Group, REIGN, stormgroup.com. That's where you'll get a lot of information about me. And if you want to get a hold of me, my email address and phone number are there.
All right. Thanks again, Michael. It's great stuff.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're listening and watching The Neil Haley Show, and we'll be back in just a moment.